Hi, Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics of the European Union. The European Commission has submitted the EU-New Zealand trade agreement to the Council for signature, bringing it a step closer to ratification. As soon as the Council, that means the 27 member states, have agreed, the EU and New Zealand can sign the agreement. If the European Parliament then agrees, the agreement can enter into force. The agreement is likely to bring significant benefits to the EU. Bilateral trade is expected to grow by up to 30%, while annual EU exports could increase by up to 4.5 billion euros. EU investment in New Zealand could increase by up to 80%. The agreement can bring companies in the EU tariff reductions, can bring them EU tariff reductions of around 140 million euros per year from the first year of application. The EU and NATO reiterated their support for Ukraine on the anniversary of the Russian invasion. "We will stand by Ukraine for as long as it's necessary," said EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Friday during a visit to Estonia. It is in the West's own security interest to ensure that Ukraine, which has been attacked by Russia, prevails. "We have shown resilience, unity and determination over the past 12 months, and President Putin can bet that this will double," von der Leyen said. She stressed that the Russian head of state has not achieved any of his strategic goals. The West is united and stands firmly on Ukraine's side. Russia's revenues from energy resources have collapsed, and Ukraine as a people is stronger than ever. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has put the importance of the Chinese push for peace in Ukraine into perspective. "I wouldn't call it a peace plan. In fact, it's not a peace plan. It's a position paper in which China has compiled all of its positions," is what Borrell said on Friday at the UN Security Council meeting in New York on the anniversary of the Russian invasion. Nevertheless, there would be interesting observations in the paper. Borrell urged China to also discuss its intentions with Ukraine. In a paper published in China had previously called for a ceasefire in the war against Ukraine. Dialogue and negotiations are the only viable solutions to the Ukraine crisis. But Ukraine rejected the paper. Diplomats and experts reacted with skepticism and disappointment, since the 12-point document did not reveal any new initiative. It was also stated that China is not neutral and has not yet condemned the Russian war of aggression. The German federal government complained that Beijing's paper was missing important elements, such as a withdrawal of Russian troops. According to an investigation report, the Dutch state and the oil companies Shell and ExxonMobil have systematically disregarded the safety of citizens in the production of natural gas for decades, despite numerous earthquakes. Money was more important than safety and health, found a parliamentary commission of inquiry. It had catastrophic consequences, they say. The Commission presented its final report on gas production on Friday in the village of Zerijp near Groningen. The Commission spoke of a unique failure of the system. Leading politicians, including Prime Minister Marc Rutte, underestimated the seriousness for far too long. Ministers acted negligently. Politicians were shocked by the Commission's verdict, though. The government wanted to comment at a later date. The oil companies did not initially react on Friday. 15 member states of the European Union called for stronger security of the EU's external borders on Friday. They also spoke out in favor of concluding agreements with third countries to take in refugees, as it was said after a two-day conference in Athens. In addition to Greece, Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland and Denmark, among others, took part in this conference. The participating countries called on the EU Commission to provide member states at the border with appropriate financial support for all types of border protection infrastructure. So they're the fences again. Support for the EU border protection agency Frontex should also be increased. The member states also called for more options for accelerated procedures with subsequent reaction in the case of unfounded asylum applications. Conference host Greece recently announced that it would expand the border fence with Turkey on the northeast Greek border to prevent illegal migration. Athens had repeatedly requested EU funds for this, but did not receive them. The EU is currently examining possibilities for Frontex to work in third countries in order to curb migration. It is the first time in history that the EU is planning to conclude these agreements with countries outside Europe, wrote the Greens MEP Tineke Strik on Twitter. Due to the strong increase in undesirable migration, the European Union had already agreed in principle to tighten the common asylum and migration policy. At the most recent summit in Brussels, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his colleagues agreed to prevent illegal entry from the outset or to make it less attractive. This should happen, for example, through more border protection, faster deportations, and an intensified fight against people smugglers. And before the meeting, Austria had threatened a blockade if there were no clear statements on migration. On the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, EU countries agreed on another package of sanctions against Russia. The new punitive measures include additional trade restrictions. This was confirmed by diplomats to the German press agency on Friday in Brussels after consultations with the member states. Poland had previously blocked the sanctions package over a dispute over rubber imports from Russia. The sanctions are too light and too weak, said Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki on Friday in Kiev. According to EU diplomats, the main concern was the import of Russian rubber, for which Italy was demanding a longer transition period. The synthetic rubber from Russia is required, among other things, for the manufacture of car tires. The EU's 10th package of sanctions also contains export restrictions worth 11 billion euros and freezes the assets of 3 banks and several companies. According to earlier information from Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, the new trade restrictions will apply in particular to industrial goods that Russian industry cannot obtain from third countries such as China. These include machine parts, antennas, cranes, special vehicles, and spare parts for trucks and engines. In addition, there are said to be export restrictions for around 50 new electronic components that can be used for Russian weapon systems, as well as drones, missiles, and helicopters. Certain rare earths and thermal imaging cameras are also covered by the new rules. To improve cybersecurity, the European Commission is suspending the use of TikTok on company devices. This also applies to personal mobile phones of Commission officials that run Commission company apps and are therefore registered in the Commission's mobile device service. The responsible management control body of the EU Commission wants to protect them from cybersecurity threats and attacks. The security developments of other social media platforms are also continuously checked. The measure is in line with the strict internal guidelines of the Commission for cybersecurity when using mobile devices for business communication. It complements the Commission's long-standing recommendations to its staff to apply best practices when using social media platforms and to prioritize cybersecurity in their day-to-day work. The suspension decided is an internal Commission decision and only applies to devices registered in the Commission's mobile service. By 2030, all people and companies in the EU should be able to surf the web at gigabit speeds. The European Commission has proposed a rollout law and other initiatives to help transform the EU's connectivity sector. As part of the Europe's Digital Decade program, every European household is to be connected to a high-performance internet connection by 2025, and to a gigabit connection by 2030. A public consultation on this subject also started last week. After a thorough examination, the European Commission has approved a new variety of genetically modified oilseed rape for use as food and feed, and has extended the corresponding approval for genetically modified soybeans. Both approvals do not cover cultivation in the EU, though. All products made from the two plants are subject to strict EU labeling and traceability regulations. The approvals are valid for 10 years. The European Food Safety Authority had previously recommended approval after scientific testing. Member States had not reached a qualified majority for or against the approval, either in the relevant standing committee or in the appeal committee. The EU imports significant amounts of GM feed, but only a small amount of GM food. EU approval is required not only for GMO cultivation, but also for placing GMOs, that's genetically modified organisms, on the market and is using products derived from them in the food and feed chain. In order for it to be granted, one condition must be met: proof through a thorough assessment by the European Food Safety Authority in collaboration with the scientific bodies of the member states that there is no risk to human and animal health and to the environment. Making the EU fisheries and agriculture sector more sustainable and resilient is the core objective of a package of proposals put forward by the European Commission. The focus is on increasing the use of clean energy sources, reducing dependence on fossil fuels, and reducing the impact of fisheries and agriculture on marine ecosystems. The proposed measures will be phased in to allow the sector to adapt. In addition, a so-called Pact for Fisheries and Oceans will support the full implementation of the common fisheries policy in coordination with member states and stakeholders in the fisheries sector, including fishermen, producer organizations, regional advisory councils, and scientists. A central concern of the proposal is also to make the sector an attractive place to work for the younger generation. And this concludes this week's video on the politics of the European Union. You hear I'm still suffering from the mother of all colds, and that's why on my smaller channels there are no videos at the moment, only on my UK channel and on the magazine channel, because after those 2 long videos you hear that already, my voice will be gone completely. And so no books and no military at the moment, but when I'm healthy again that will come back. And we'll see us as well in the next video, because I will be back.